Hello, my name is Nicholas Ionata. I'm one of the founding developers on the CaSMM project, and today I'm going to do a walkthrough. So, CaSMM is broken up into three applications. We have a client, which is running React and uses the Blockly framework to do all the block programming. Then there's a server, which is running on Node and the Strapi framework, which is a content management system. And this will basically serve static files and also handle all the data, REST endpoints, permissions, things of that nature. And then finally we have the compile service, and this uses the actual Arduino IDE, and we'll go ahead and compile Arduino code and return the bytecode that we can then flash on the boards. So this application can run in a number of environments, the first one being your development local environment. So we'll go ahead and get you set up with that today. You'll notice that there's two kind of parts you have to start. First, you have to start the client application, and this is just going to be the React dev server. And then you'll also have to start the actual server stuff. And that's all managed through Docker Compose, which essentially will help us build things and get everything running together and networked. So I'll go ahead and switch over to a terminal. And what you're going to want to do is make sure you have cloned the repository. So we'll go ahead and get into that. I'm going to open up my IDE, and you'll see this resembles the repo, like I said, and we have our Docker Compose file. So what we'll first want to do is we'll go ahead and run Docker Compose. So we'll run Docker Compose up, and we'll do that at the root directory. And what you'll notice is that is then going to go ahead and start some different services. You'll see each one of these is a container that's built from an image. And so you can see in the Docker Compose file, we have the server, and that comes from the Strapi image. We have this compile, and it builds from an image that we have in the compile. DB is Postgres, and the compile queue is Redis. So all these things are defined in here, and then they'll go ahead and when we run Docker Compose up, it'll build images, pull images, and then start containers for each one of these, and then handle the networking. So something to see is the database. If you'll see right here, when you first load the database, it'll go ahead and do all these inserts and create sequence, and basically that's seeding the database. And the way that works is we have this volume map that basically we map this scripts folder to this Docker entry point folder in the Postgres image. And what that'll do is it'll run this initdb script when the container first starts for the first time, and then that will grab one of these dumps files depending on the environment. So that's how that all works. So you see development is the environment. It grabs the environment here and we'll grab this resulting dump and load it into the database. So now that that's going, what we'll do is I'll open up another terminal window, and we're going to want to this time go into our client folder. Make sure you have all the dependencies started, and we'll go ahead and do yarn start. Oh, excuse me. I'm not using yarn, I'm using npm. So now we'll go ahead and start that. While that's going, I will go ahead and show you guys the Strapi admin panel. So here's Strapi, this is your login. And what this is like I said, it's a content management system. So you can see all of our different content types, blocks, block categories, classrooms, and you can see here's this data. And then what you can do is you can add data. You can also create additional content types. And what this will do is it'll automatically create things in the database and get the basic REST endpoints all up to speed. There's also roles and permissions, where you can say for each whoever this is, classroom manager, you can say oh, they can use this endpoint, that endpoint, and it'll manage all that for you. So that's really nice. And then through this as well, you'll notice that like right now we can change the content types. So like if I go to content type builder, I can go ahead and change this, but this is just because it's running in development. Once it actually loads, builds like to static files for production, you won't be able to edit these because we don't want to break anything in production. So now that the front end has loaded, this is the actual React front end, and it's going to be pulling data from our Strapi backend. So you can enter in a code and join and do the whole thing, and now you're programming. So what's really cool is you can this is Blockly. You can do your whole block programming, and then what will happen if we open up the network tab, when I hit upload code, you'll start to see there's a couple different things that happen. This is, we can ignore that error for now, but basically what happens is we first will make a submission. So that's actually a content type. So I'll go ahead and go to submissions, and you'll see here's my submission, here's my code, here's the outputted hex, std output, success, whatnot. So what happens is we make that submission, and that submission will initially, the status will be pending or created, and then you'll see we then poll, and we try to get that submission, and we're continuously getting it, and you'll see the status will just be compiling until eventually it gets completed. So what happens behind the scenes is the Strappy will go ahead and put that into a queue. So if we go to the API and we go to submissions, and then we go to services, submissions, you'll see that we will be compiling, this compile job code will get written, or run, excuse me, and it'll go ahead and do compile get job, and we'll go ahead, or it's all this kind of start job, so it'll go ahead and take the submission and put it into a Redis queue, and then on the other end of that, we have the compile service, which is listening to jobs. It's subscribed to jobs, and once it gets a job, it'll go to compile it, put it back in the queue, which then Strappy will notice that, it'll update the status, and then our front end will then pull and get that and return that. So we have a documentation piece on that. If you go to compile, you can see the diagram here. It'll create a submission, add a job to the queue, compile will start compiling, it'll then finish that job, update the server, it'll update the database, and then our front end will pull and get that. So all the documentation on that compiling is actually here in compile, so that'll give you the full overview of that. A couple other things I would like to talk about is Docker. So basically each one of our services is wrapped up in a Docker container or Docker image. So the root Docker image, this will build our server. And the first thing it does is it grabs the client, and it'll actually install the client dependencies and build the client. And then what happens is we go ahead and go to the server, build the server, all its dependencies, and then we copy the static client folders into the public folder. So anything in the server public folder will actually get distributed by the server. So when the server's running, it will route requests to the client, and we actually manage that through this proxy middleware. So basically, this will say if it's an API request, send that to the API. If not, serve all the client static. So that's how that works. And so now we can get into actually deployment. So we mentioned this is the development environment. You guys got started with it. The database got seeded. You can view the front end, the whole thing. So now you might be wondering, well, how do we actually deploy this? So we are running Heroku for this, and there's two different environments. We have a CaSMM staging and a CaSMM production, and basically, and then we also have review apps. So all of this deployment stuff is managed through GitHub Workflows and GitHub Actions. So they'll go ahead and they will build the images, and then they will upload the images to these applications. And in the applications, you'll notice in an application we have Postgres, Redis, and then we have a web component, which is our Strappy server that's running the application stuff, and it's also serving our front end. And then we have a compile service. And this is all networked together and works great. So you might be wondering, how does that all deploy, right? So if we go to GitHub and we go to workflows, you'll see there's a number of workflows. The first one we'll look at is these deploy scripts. So you'll see that they'll call stemc auto build test deploy and give it some image stuff, what app, and then some secrets. And what that actually is it's another repository that we've created that does GitHub Actions called auto. And so you can see this is the build test deploy, and what build test and deploy does is it will run this script, excuse me, not that script, I believe it's this one. Yeah, it'll run this script that'll basically build the Docker images. So you'll see it'll build the server, it'll build the compile, and it'll push those to Docker, the Docker hub, and then it'll also log into Heroku and release those new Docker containers and start them up. So you might be wondering, like, how does or where is all the Docker images stored? You'll see they're actually stored right here in our repository. So packages, we have the server, the compile, and build. Build, this is just something special that it's an environment to build in, but the main two things that get built and deployed to Heroku are server and compile. So see, here's our server, and it's up to these different numbers. You can see the latest version right here, 164, 164. And so that is how it all gets deployed. It all is done automated. And what's really cool is every time there's a pull request, each pull request, when you open it, it'll actually build a new Docker image and and deploy a review app on Heroku. So if you do a PR, it'll come here and it'll create a review app automatically. So let's see if we can get that going real quick. I'm not sure if there's something to actually do it for. Let's just see. Yeah, I don't want to break anything that's going on right now. But basically, if you opened up a pull request, you would see it would actually dynamically create a review app called like CaSMM PR5 or something like that. And you could use the entire full stack app, compile, front end, server, the whole thing, all in its own staging environment. So yeah, I believe that is the majority of the things I wanted to cover. Again, we have this local environment where you're running the React server and this Docker Compose setup. We then have staging and production, and those are running on Heroku, and they're automatically built and deployed via GitHub Actions, which you can all see in this GitHub folder and the workflows, and it's easier to kind of see too if you see actions. So we have all these different actions that'll create the review app, delete the review app, deploy to production, deploy to staging, do a review, tag the latest, things of that nature. And one other thing I wanted to say is we also have something that automatically does tagging, and that's another GitHub action. So you can see there's that tag there in the auto repository right here. You'll see there is this thing called tag, and this is another GitHub action that'll automatically do semantic versioning and submit a new tag when you do pull requests. So all that should be documented, but yeah, that is a quick overview of CaSMM. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I'll be more than happy to help.